Yeah, but I really would love to hear about your experiences traveling as gay couples, because I assume a lot of travelers who are gay will have this consideration about, like, we talked a bit about cultural differences, right? And some countries are not that open to that, right? When you guys plan your travels, do you take that into consideration? Like, which countries should I go to and which countries should we avoid? Or do you just go head on, head in first?
It's changed over time. Our first year when we were looking at Bulgaria, I was concerned about that because I was like, well, Bulgaria is a former Eastern European country. It's, the Balkans. I haven't heard great things about it. So I had to do some research and I was assuaged. I wasn't too worried about it. And then we got there and we started to understand certain things about our situation. And first is I'm going to touch on the privilege. We are two white American males, and we are traveling in often, countries that tend to be more conservative on these issues are often, unfortunately, more economically disadvantaged. So we are coming in there with a lot of money compared to them, and we're spending it. And they have a vested interest in not caring about that we're a gay couple. So that's never been a problem for us. That isn't the sort of thing that we've had anybody not want to rent to us or anybody treat us badly because we're a gay couple. We actually coined a term to sort of describe it, and that is we call it the weird foreigner rule. And just to be clear, we're the weird foreigners. And by that term means that when we arrive in a culture that's not our own, we're not part of that culture. We're outsiders. We're weird foreigners to those people. And they are therefore less invested in how we fit into their culture. Our being a gay couple there doesn't really change anything about their beliefs, their religion, anything like that. We're there, we're guests, we're spending money. So therefore, it's not as big a deal.
We are, I mean, as Michael said, we are white, sort of traditionally masculine men that would not necessarily read. We have a lot of privilege. And so it is, as Michael said, it's in their interest not to make a big deal. At the same time, we do often think if there was a homophobic incident, and we've had lots of awkward moments, and we had to go to the authorities, are the authorities going to take our side or are they going to take the side of the bigot? And that's concerning. There are certain places we wouldn't go. We wouldn't probably ever go to Saudi Arabia, but we have gone to more traditional countries. And I mean, everybody needs to decide these things for themselves. And some people are personally thinking, I'm just not going to go there. I'm not comfortable with that. Our experience has been, as Michael said, people are very hospitable and they treat us as individuals. It's also our choice is we see ourselves as visitors. We are guests. And so it is sort of in part our responsibility to conform to their mores, and we're not going to sacrifice dignity. We're not going to violate our personal principles, but we're going to be, I don't want to use the word discreet, but we're not necessarily going to, there are certain things we wouldn't do. We're going to be respectful, just like when you're in a mosque, you're going to wear long pants, you're going to take off your hat, well, maybe we're not going to hold hands necessarily in certain neighborhoods. We're not, we live next to a lot of traditional families and Muslims. And I mean, first of all, it is a stereotype that all Muslims are anti-gay. We have many pro-gay Muslim friends that we've met, and we lived in, even Istanbul has many, many tolerant people. But the fact is, there's a healthy tension, I think. You have to be respectful, but at the same time, we ask gay friends when we visit these countries, well, what do you think about the idea? People say, don't come to Turkey. People say, boycott this place. And they say, they always say the same thing, which is, that's the worst thing you can do. Tell your friends to come here, be more visible, and then go back to your home country and tell people what things are like here and create international pressure on our government. That's what will help us, not, just ignoring our country completely.
There's two other things I want to add to that when a gay person is apprehensive. And I understand, anybody LGBTQ being apprehensive going into a country with a reputation, a situation they don't know. That is that much of the world places a huge value on hospitality and making you feel welcome and not judging you. They want you to enjoy their country. They're happy you're there. We see ourselves as guests, but they see us as guests too. And they really want to make us feel welcome and show us things. So there's that aspect of it. We also feel like by coming and not necessarily being, I don't even know what assertively gay would be, but by not making a big deal out of the fact that we're gay, we let them get to know us. Like when we checked into our place here, the woman asked us, "Are you sleeping in one bed or are you going to be using the sofa couch?" And we're like, "Just one bed. That's all we need." So she knows we're together, we're a couple. And now she's getting to know us as a person, as people coming over and saying, oh, can we get the wine opener, and chatting a little bit about, what we think of living here in Ohrid. And hopefully by doing that, we leave, and, we're not going around the world trying to save anybody. That's not something we'd ever try to do, but we hope that we have a bit of an impact and sort of change the thinking a little bit just by being ourselves.
And what Michael said about hospitality is really true. And one thing I did not realize was how important hospitality is to Islam. And so here we are in these Muslim majority countries, and I feel so welcomed and so, sort of honored. I feel like an honored guest. And it really violated the stereotype I had in my mind. We all have stereotypes about different cultures. It's like, oh, this wasn't what I was expecting at all. A, that Muslims are all conservative, and B, that there's some sort of homophobic violence or something brewing right under the surface. That hasn't been our experience at all. I mean, in fact, my two favorite cities where I felt most welcome were Mexico City, Mexico, and Istanbul, Turkey. And even though both Mexico and Turkey have sort of traditional cultures, the cultures themselves, hospitality is such a big part of that I don't feel, and also I feel more safe in Turkey than in Mexico, but I also feel physically safe. There's just no crime in Istanbul, or very little crime in our experience.
I walked over Istanbul, and I mean, sometimes late at night, and never felt threatened in the least.
Now, it could be Michael and I are older, and I know how to maneuver a world that is more homophobic because I literally grew up that way. I knew that. And I know some of our younger gay friends, they might feel like, well, you're asking me to compromise who I am and visibility, and you're asking me to violate my principles, my personal principles. And I respect that. But that's just, for me, we can go to countries, and I'll turn to Michael and I'll say, oh my gosh, this feels so familiar. It's like America was in 1985 or 1995 or 2006. This is exactly where they are. And it is true. I mean, I don't want to be culturally imperialistic. I don't want to apply Western standards to other cultures, but it is true that the way the cultures are with regard to gay issues, it feels very familiar, and I know how to behave. And so if you can make that mental leap, I mean, we have found in so many ways the world isn't anything to be afraid of. If you do your due diligence, if you are mindful of your environment, and if you make friends, the world is not the hostile place that I thought it was when we left home 5 years ago.
I mean, you do have to exercise common sense.
Yes.
So when we lived in Tbilisi, Georgia, which unfortunately is a country that's struggling with a fair bit of homophobia at this point, we went to this special nightclub one night. Once a month, they have a gay night called Harum Nights at this big Basiani nightclub, big underground nightclub. And there was security that you had to do. You had to pre-register before you went. They had security there. You had to have an ID to show them to get in. So we don't want to pretend like, nothing bad can happen in the world. I mean, you do have to look at your situation. If you're going to be at a bar at 2 a.m, a gay nightclub, then you do want to be more aware of, have there been any homophobic things happening here? Do I want to leave this club by myself? I mean, I do know a friend who did get gay bashed in Tbilisi, unfortunately, one night as he was leaving. So, use common sense, and as Brent said, do your due diligence.
And what Michael said, our experience is not the same as the experience of a local gay person, because we've heard there is plenty of oppression in these countries, and we've heard it directly from people we now consider to be our friends in these countries. We just think the way to reduce that oppression is not to isolate those countries, but to go and, we have power, and unfortunately it's privilege, but we also have power as Westerners. And if gay tourists go to a country, conservative governments are going to be mindful of that, and then that will eventually trickle down to the locals on some level. This is what the locals tell us. But I do want to say that the experience for local people is usually very, very different. And we've heard horrifying stories, of oppression, and it breaks our heart.
And we try and use our privilege that we do have, not there on the ground, because you can't really affect change that way, other than, like I said, letting people get to know you. But we use our platform. We use our newsletter and the column in LGBTQ Nation to write about these issues. So there are some Westerners who will breeze into Istanbul and have an awesome time and say, oh, I don't know why people say this is homophobic. Nothing happened to me at all. This is crazy. It's a great country. And as Brent said, that's not what's true for the locals. So we try and use our platform to talk about that and help in that way.